This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, everybody. Chris Pitman here with Royal LePage Benchmark. It's a really great day. I've got Alan Stewart on the line. Alan is a really good realtor friend of mine from Royal LePage, Sussex, on the Sunshine Coast in BC. Alan, I don't know what's going on right now, but I'm seeing some chickens outside, right over your right shoulder there.
I'm prepping for the apocalypse. We have 15 chickens out there cranking out the eggs. And if they stop laying eggs, you know what's happening to the chickens.
looks like you're prepared. Alan is a great resource, everybody. He's the author of the book Mentor and Me. This is a fantastic book, Alan, and a lot of the content that's in here is timely for today and the circumstances that we're in. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. What's in here that people can get some value out of right now?
Well, that's a great question. There's lots of things. It's, one of the things I find that, and just a little background on me, Chris, I've come from being a pretty productive realtor to going into management and helping work with realtors in our company for 4 or 5 years, and then bounced back to coming back into sales because you know better than most people, Chris, the joys of managing realtors. And there's a million of them we love, and there's a couple of them that make us go back into selling. So anyway.
I love all of them, Alan. I love all of them. But on that note, so you were successful as a realtor, then you managed one of the largest companies in the country, right?
Yeah, I think so. We had about 400 agents, so it was working out of up to 7 offices at one time. We pared that down to 5 kind of productive offices. But yeah, no, it was a great challenge. I'll always be grateful for the opportunity and the amount I learned in that job. And it was during that time that I wrote that book, Mentor and Me, which was really a lot of my memoirs of growing into the business with my old business partner, Ryan Campbell, who taught me so much about the business. But a lot of it I also made up based on the things I saw people within our company doing. So I credited a lot of this stuff to my friend Ryan, but also mentioned in the introduction to the book that really these weren't all his great ideas. But one of the biggest challenges in my life was coming back into the business, putting those things into action that I had written about in the book. And I'm not trying to plug the book. It was just that I felt this additional pressure, because if the stuff I had written about didn't work, then I'd be looking like a hypocrite. And that was really way down the list on things I wanted to be in my life. So I'm pleased to say that the things in the book have worked for the most part. I'm very grateful for the relationships I was able to build, because a big part of my business is based on referrals, and we talk a lot about that in the book. And so when I put the stuff into action in the book, I was thrilled to see the results. So yeah, I think one of the things I've come to appreciate is realtors are hesitant to invest in themselves, whether it be my book or anybody's book or a program or coaching. Realtors, because we don't know where our next paycheck is necessarily coming from, if we aren't business planning properly, we tend not to invest in ourselves, and I think that's a real miss for our industry. So I know there's people who don't want to spend $20 on a book, but if you're not prepared to invest a little bit in yourself and learn from it, then I think your future is kind of spelled out in advance.
So one of the things that I really love about you, Alan, and that I've learned over time is that it's, when you say something or you write something in the book, like you said, this is Alan's approach. This is what you're doing. And, your track record proves all that. And so having it all in one place in a book like Mentor and Me is an invaluable resource to agents. And I've always appreciated that about you. Even when you come to our office and you do business planning for our people and everything, it's not a business plan that you've conceptualized in theory. This is like Alan Stewart's business plan. Hey, look, somebody's feeding the chickens.
Oh yeah, there's my wife, looking good. She's got her running pants on and her Mac jacket.
That's awesome.
That's life on the Sunshine Coast.
It's like a little sideshow over there.
Sorry about that. Chickens are happy. Well, thanks. I appreciate that, Chris. And I think, I think if I had one of my own criticisms of maybe some of the stuff I do, is that maybe it's a bit too rudimentary. But I think so often in life we just forget about the basics. We keep trying to reinvent the wheel or come up with a better wheel. You know what? The wheel works really well, and there's a lot of people that have used the wheel to get themselves down the road in the past. Why wouldn't we just take that stuff and use it? So I know some of the feedback I get from some of my teaching and stuff is that it's a little rudimentary, but the question I always have for those people is, well, are you doing it? You know, I'd rather have it be simple
Right.
and effective and getting done than not getting done at all. So we've really, you know, I'm not all glitz and glamour in my marketing stuff. I know my website probably sucks. I know, you know, but at least the things that we committed to doing, we're getting done, and it's proving to be effective. We were having a great start to the year. We were, in terms of unit production, we were #1 in our market. So there's probably 130 realtors in our market, and we were tied with the #1 guy who's got a big development program on the go down in Gibson's, and so we were tied for the number of units up until, well, we still are, but obviously we're a little disappointed that our business volume will get slowed down along with everybody else's. But the stuff in the book is the stuff we're doing, and it seems to be working. So yeah, I can stand behind it that way, I think.
Which kind of means like it's really important right now to be intentional about doing the things and, you know, sort of running your business by design, not being reactive, having a plan and all that kind of stuff. So in here and in our conversations in the past, you've talked to me a lot about things that you do outside of real estate that kind of like help you in your community and stuff. So could you shed some light on that, please?
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think it's for everybody. You know, I mean, there's a million ways to build a good real estate business. You know better than most. But for me, it's always been about giving in a purposeful way. I love Adam Grant's book, Give and Take. I think it's one of the best business books out there in terms of how you can live your life in a way that brings you lots of joy by giving. And so long as you have this kind of expectation that the world's going to take care of you on the back end as a result of doing that, you don't do it specifically. You know, you don't quit the Rotary Club or you don't quit the chamber because you're not getting business out of that channel. You just know that by giving and putting into the world, good things of that are going to come out of the world. So I believe in that in my soul, and it's just kind of how we operate, but it's proved to be very fruitful in our business. So during this kind of crazy times, one of the things I've done is stepped up as the communications coordinator for our local Pender Harbor Community Task Force around the COVID-19 epidemic and the things that are going on. And that's put me into touch with the Sunshine Coast emergency response people and their communications people. So it's broadening my sphere. That's put me in touch with people from Vancouver Coastal Health. I sit on the board of the health center here, and so I'm able to share information in that direction. So I think there's some unique opportunities in what's going on to really set yourself up as a leader in your community by finding ways that you can help, and not necessarily doing it looking for the big payoff right away where people are going to say, gee, that was great seeing you stepping up in our community, but to become a leader in your community and to become responsible for delivering information to people. You know, I didn't do it for those reasons, but it's certainly turning out to be an effective way to garner some credibility within our market.
Yeah, engagement through service is such an important thing, right? You know,
Yeah.
we talk all the time about coming from contribution and giving back. And what better way to give back than to be the voice of information and resources that are funneling through the people around you? Like, I can't think of a more noble thing to be doing right now.
Yeah, it's I sure wish I had seen the future a couple of months ago and bought some Zoom stock, and sure GoToMeeting is doing as well. But you know, it's incredible to see people that are in their late 70s, early 80s jumping on these Zoom calls and practicing ukulele on Zoom calls and doing using technology in a way they never have before because they don't have a choice. And that's going to revolutionize, I think, how people work in the world now. You know, my mom, who's in her late 70s, is now very comfortable jumping on a group chat with all our family members, and that would never have happened before unless the ability to just get together in another way was available. So I think that's going to change our business in lots of ways. I think it's going to allow us to work more effectively by using things like this GoToMeeting, Zoom, Facebook, FaceTime, sorry, any of those kind of channels. It's really going to change how people kind of operate, especially if this thing carries on for another few months, which sounds like they're looking into June, July now before they'll be taking off the social distancing. So this is going to become the norm. So it's a good time to look at those kind of opportunities. I wonder how many people are out there scraping off tape adhesive and nail polish off of their web cameras on their laptops now, because it's becoming a real everyday tool. You know, I think people are breaking down some borders as a result of what's going on.
Yeah, I've almost got a studio set up. So when I moved from my office to the house where there are only two of us working in this great big office, I have to like unpack all of this stuff and I bring it to my house and I set it up because I'll get agent calls and things like that from the house. But really, it's plug and play. It's super simple. Anybody can do it, as you said. Your mother's doing it, and there's a lot of community being created around it. So one of the things that some people are doing is they're actually like playing board games online. So
Yeah.
I've had some people play in my office playing Catan online, and they're like bantering back and forth on the messaging. It's perfect. So I think one of the great things is that this has really propelled technology. It's really kind of like cemented what we kind of knew was going to happen, but it was loosey goosey going forward. This has kind of like poured some gasoline on it, and I don't think it's going to go away.
No, I think you're quite right, Chris. I mean, we've got some very close friends in Vancouver that my wife and I would regularly, when we had the opportunity, they're a ferry ride away. So, but they would come up and spend the weekend with us, and we'd play crib, right? And you'd have a couple glasses of wine, you play crib. So we set up the iPad in the middle of the table, and my wife and I had a deck of cards on our side, and they had a deck of cards on their side, and I partnered up with my old high school buddy Don Steven, and he would deal to him and his wife 5 cards. I deal 5 cards to us. We'd hold up the cards to show them what was in the crib at the end of it, and we had a great time. We were kind of laughing about the idea of doing it, but really, that was not a whole lot different, and none of us had to drive home after the experience, so that was great.
Right, right. Oh, I love it. So let's switch back into business for a second. In the way of business planning. So you're a business planning guru. I've had you to my brokerage, and you do a phenomenal job. Some of us are feeling like that work that we did in November and December in terms of our business plans is a little bit out the window.
Yeah.
What can we be doing to rejig that in position, in a responsible way by design to go forward?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think it's the appropriate thing to do with the time that we've been given at the moment is to reflect on how we've been doing things in the past, and with some expectation of what's going to be coming in the future. And yeah, of course, everyone in the planet is looking at reduced income this year over last year. So maybe you're going to have to look at some of your spending, go back to your budget and have a look at what you had planned on doing this year. Maybe you're not going to be able to do everything that you had planned on doing, but then find those things that are going to be effective moving forward. So I know one of the things on my list of things to get done, and it's been on my list for the last few years, and we actually just hired a new client care coordinator a month before the outbreak kind of happened. So we've committed to her, and it's been great because she's been going through our database and through our old files, going through our old FinTrack records and putting in people's birthdays into our database of Realty Juggler is the software we use. And now people are getting birthday cards from me that they had never had before, and that wouldn't have happened if business hadn't slowed down. So what are the opportunities in this situation, and how can I make assumptions moving forward? I mean, the world's going to keep rotating. Things are
Right.
going to keep happening. You listen to some of the business gurus, and I think about Phil Soper a lot and how he's engaging and communicating with people. This will come to an end, and it might be a painful time during this time, but there are epic events in our history. You think about world wars and famines, those kinds of things. This has the potential to last for months and months and months, but there are people working hard in the background, and eventually things will return to normal. I mean, I think that's safe to say that there's going to be a time. And so how are you going to be positioned for it when that comes? What's going to happen to inventory? I mean, if people, I've got clients who are, I took a client an offer the other day, and it gave them so much stress because they didn't know where they were going to go. They planned on moving across country, and they said, you know what, not only can we not respond to this offer, but we really should be canceling our listing because we're not prepared to do anything until we know where we're going to go. So for me, being as empathetic as I can now and trying to earn the trust of those people by doing what's best for them now should put me in good stead down the road. When they are ready to relist, I'm hopeful and expectant of the fact that they're going to call me to come back and relist their house. We've got the photos done, everything's ready to go. So why wouldn't they? Your question is a good one. It's a really tough one. How do you plan for the future when you don't know what the future is going to look like? My future looks exactly like it did before we entered into this pandemic stage. There's going to be a ripple in time here where we're going to have to get through this kind of rough patch, and then all of a sudden things will be back to where they are. And who knows? Maybe if you set yourself up properly and you take care of your finances, you'll be in a way better position compared to your competition.
Right. And so some interesting things are coming out of that because you just described a scenario where the client was, apprehensive of moving because they didn't know where to go. it's different province to province. What's going on with COVID-19 and the government restrictions and the way the industry is reacting is varying across the country.
Yeah.
So I had the opposite thing happen yesterday, actually, where a client was selling their house in Ontario and they wanted to move to Alberta. And we're in a little bit of a different environment. So part of the conversations that we're having, even as we work on the agent networking side of our business and client engagement and kind of things, is to understand what's going on in BC, what's going on in Alberta, how is it being handled in Ontario, what does it look like on the East Coast? Those things are really important too, aren't they?
For sure. And I mean, it's so fluid. We had, I was thrilled to put together a deal for a gal. Again, this is a gal in her mid 80s that we did everything through Authentisign for the first time ever, but I just stayed with her on the phone, walked her through the process, got a deal done. She's got a tenant in her house. Everything was rosy. The buyer expects vacant possession, so we set the dates way down the road, but we had an eager and willing buyer and seller, and but the buyer's only interested with vacant possession. Well, then the real estate board just sent us out a information piece yesterday noting that evictions are now no longer allowed within the province of British Columbia. So we can't evict. It's illegal to evict a tenant during this time, which makes total sense, but I didn't even think about that as being a possible risk to the deal. So now all parties are going to have to kind of collaborate and decide how they're going to work moving forward, because we got a problem that's been put in place based on legislation. The BC government has deemed real estate an essential service. So our offices are closed, people can do business. There's lots of reservations around doing it and lots of reasons why people choose not to. People don't want to have people coming through their houses. That's fine. Other people have to sell and they need to have people coming through their houses. So we're following the protocols that are expected of us to, talk about social distancing and no touching anything within the home, wearing gloves, wearing masks, dealing with those things while we're doing showings. But, people have to have their lives continue to move on when it comes to real estate. It's the biggest part of their financial portfolio for the most part. So we're trying to do business, but it's taking a lot longer. You have to be way more patient. And I completely forget what your question was.
It's okay. You touched on it. So the other side of this is to consider that real estate right now, with oil and gas being in the quagmire that it's in, is the largest contributor to Canada's GDP, right? So we have to find ways to keep the wheels spinning, managing everybody's comfort level, respecting everybody's decisions, understanding legislation, and protecting ourselves, right? So like as you said, the world keeps spinning. There's a lot of things to consider, but it can be done, and it is very important for all of us as business owners, but also for the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we feel for you guys all the time. I mean, it's a very challenging time. It was a very challenging time in our country before this hit. I'm only hopeful that the kind of combined effort that it's going to take to overcome this kind of situation is going to bring people together rather than drive them apart, and that people will start to see the needs and the impacts of a lot of the legislated stuff that's going on the ground, and maybe be more empathetic to one another, because we're all having to deal with the same thing at the same time, which tends to bring people together.
Yeah, we had really great news in Alberta 2 days ago, Alan. They actually they put through the pipeline, so the pipeline is happening. So good will come out of it. We're excited about that. Anyway, anything that you think that we should talk about before we wrap it up here?
Let me have a look at my notes here, Chris. I think resiliency is probably going to be the key to success in this. Staying positive, staying healthy, staying happy, trying to utilize this gift of time that we so rarely have. I can tell you that from my own personal experience, I feel completely not productive. I tend to bounce from a little bit of work in the morning to a little bit about cleaning the garage to a little bit about, doing these projects that I meant to do. And then I managed to get insurance for my motorcycle. So then I go out and I feel like Mad Max running around the empty streets of the Sunshine Coast. But it's, I'm self-isolating. I got my helmet on, and but it's, if you're a guy like I know you are, who feels the need to be productive and not to waste any of this precious gift of life that we have, it's a challenging time, because we're not on holiday. We are expected to be available. We're still responding to texts and email inquiries and calls from customers, and yet we're not really on. And so it's a tough time for people to kind of find their groove. I don't know if you caught Richard Robbins' presentation the other day on things to do. My one takeaway was his kind of daily schedule, which had obviously been revamped as a result of what's going on, but building in time for exercise, building in time for rest and relaxation. I'm disappointed that I'm not reading more. I've gone back and I'm starting to read books that I've read 1 or 2 times in the past, because the ones that have really got a lot of vital information for us. I'm reading The Power of Habits again now, Charles Duhigg's book that I love, but I'm not sinking into it. Like I'm not really diving into anything. I'm just kind of dabbling. So that's something I need to work on, and I'm open to suggestions from people in terms of how to kind of maintain a focus on things and feel productive, while at the same time taking advantage of this great opportunity that we have. That's time for ourselves.
Yeah, you said a couple of interesting things. One about sleep, and then this other thing about not getting into books and stuff. One of the things that I've learned over time is that it's important to be conscientious about exercising both sides of your brain. And so I think I shared this a couple of times with you in the past, and it's a little bit of a weird thing I'm going to share with you right now, but I actually started to learn how to play the ukulele. And so
I'm waiting for the concert.
Right. So what I figured out was that all of my activities were logic driven, and that I'd have trouble sleeping. I'd have trouble, shutting down, turning off, and feeling rejuvenated. And then when I decided that I was going to exercise the creative side of my mind and learn how to play the ukulele, which is something I've never done in the past, all of that kind of got fixed. That creative outlet allowed my brain to relax, or allowed me to refocus. I started sleeping again, felt so much better. And yeah, so maybe something creative like that would be good for you. And I'd love to see you playing a ukulele with those goats and
Well,
chickens out there.
I was going to say there's we could do some Zoom ukulele classes together.
We can.
Is there any instrument that pairs well with the ukulele? So maybe we could do a little jam session, like does a flute go with a ukulele?
I don't know. But I think the message is, find a creative outlet. A lot of us in business get trapped into that logic side of our brain and doing everything that way. And if we're reading and doubling down on education and all these other things, it's important that we're aware of the creative side of our brain and how that impacts us and what that does for us physically and anatomically. So
Awesome.
Yeah, that would
That's
be my
great
advice.
advice. Imagine that. Practical advice from Chris Pitman. Who would have thought?
Okay, so we'll wrap it up there, Alan. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. Guys, if anybody has any questions for Alan, he actually has been gracious enough to sign up as a mentor on our Royal LePage Business Success or Business Growth Strategies group. So I would recommend that you take advantage of that. Get a copy of his book. It's available on Amazon. We gave one of these to every single one of our agents this year, and it really paid off. This is a great book. So you get my endorsement, not because I like you as a guy, but because you write quality stuff and it makes sense. So I appreciate you, and thank you very much, Alan.
Yeah, I appreciate you too. And best of luck to everyone out there, thinking about everyone across the country. And so glad for an opportunity to say hello to everyone. So thanks for this, Chris.
Okay, thanks.